The crew at the V8 Speed Resto Shop perform all kinds of upgrades on classics and muscle cars, from performance improvements to complete restorations. Recently, a friend and customer of the V8 Speed Resto Shop purchased this clean 1972 Ford Bronco. And although he liked the truck, he wasn't super happy with its performance. A quick call to the V8 Speed Resto Shop set the plan in motion, including a hot engine upgrade, as well as some creature comforts for those long rides out on the dusty trail.
These old Ford Broncos are cool trucks. They have a short wheelbase, so they ride like a bucking Bronco, but they don't have a whole lot of power. So we're going to fix that by installing a Coyote V8 from BC Broncos. Getting passed by economy cars. Jeez.
So currently I think Broncos and trucks are really hot. Bronco specifically is actually coming out with a new Bronco in 2020. So I think it's a great platform to begin to make some power with and create something new.
While the V8 crew has restored and brought many muscle cars back to life, they are no strangers to classic trucks.
We've done a 47 Dodge, we've also done a 51 pickup truck, and the Bronco I think is right along those lines with something that we can do here in-house.
This is a pretty clean truck. Our customer bought it after it was restored, and he brought it to our shop to do a few performance upgrades, namely a Hydro Boost brake unit. We also put some LED lights in the headlights, but it still doesn't make very much power, and it's not like he wants to go racing, but he definitely wants to feel it more when he puts his foot down. So this is a 302 V8 that's in it now. It's got a roller cam, an aluminum intake, and a Rochester quadrojet carburetor, which is kind of interesting on a Ford engine. But all that's coming out in favor of a far more lightweight aluminum 5-liter Coyote motor. It's going to be making upwards of 440 horsepower and probably get better fuel economy than this old rig too.
So the Coyote engine's actually a pretty good platform. They're built to, they don't have a whole lot of low end, but up high they really scream. They're all aluminum block. The heads on them are huge, and that's where all the power comes from. So the Coyote also has variable valve timing, and they're also really lightweight with roughly 440 pounds completely assembled. So as soon as we removed it from the crate, we began disassembly on the engine, mainly the plastic parts, but we ended up repainting the entire block black in order to match the engine bay of the Bronco.
So in doing the Coyote swap in our 72 Bronco, we had to make a few changes because the engine is rather large. One of the things we had to do is move this inner fender, which really wasn't terribly difficult. We actually cut along the factory spot welded flange, slid it in a little over an inch, trimmed it back, and re-spot welded it. A couple other things we had to do down on the frame, reinforce the steering gear mount to strengthen up and move it farther away from the engine so that there's room for accessory drive over there. And then while we're at it, we're going to fill in some of these unused holes, like these over here and a couple of these other ones, so that everything looks nice behind the nice new engine.
The firewall fabrication is completed, then sealed with epoxy, bodyworked, and painted gloss black to match the Bronco's exterior. Now it's time for the old horse to get a new heart.
We ended up using motor mounts from BC Bronco, their swap mounts that allowed us to bolt this Coyote into the Bronco. Something else that you're going to want to look into is going to be the accessory drive. Those are a bit challenging, and there are certain companies that make different options. Depending on your setup, this one here is naturally aspirated, so we didn't have a whole lot of geometry that we had to deal with adding a supercharger belt. When the Bronco came to us, it came to us with Hydro Boost already installed, and we wanted to retain that. So what we ended up doing is using the power steering pump that was supplied with the accessory drive kit. It was a Vintage Air front runner system that we used, and we ended up adapting that to the Hydro Boost in order to retain its braking system. When the Bronco arrived, it came backed by a 5-speed transmission, and we wanted to retain that. So what we did was we had an adapter made to adapt his transmission to the back of this Coyote, and then from there everything else just bolted in. clutch that we used was hydraulic. So we used a hydraulic slave, obviously, that's bolted down by the transmission area, and then just ran our lines from the clutch pedal up to the slave cylinder.
We're using a Ford Performance ECM and wiring harness to manage our Coyote's fuel and ignition systems. Connecting the engine harness is a simple plug-and-play process to the sensors and fuel injectors, and then the main power harness is routed into the cabin, with power and center fuse box mounts inside the dash.
So when considering doing an engine swap, obviously that's a pretty expensive endeavor, so if you can have some better gauges, that's always a wise decision. We opted to go with the Dakota Digitals. They give us a great platform, and you can also add and make them custom to whatever you want to see in your dash. We went with the Dakota Digital HDX gauge, and they are significantly improved over the VHX. You can add on a lot more than with VHX. So what we decided to do was run a CAN bus, and what that is basically a data cable that runs in between the control box for the gauges to the ECM of the Bronco. So everything's transferred via one cable versus running a bunch of wires, and it really cleans up the look. Also, on the interior, we added vintage air. The customer wanted to be a bit more comfortable when he was out cruising around. And what that entails is mounting your evap box underneath the dash, and then the hoses we decided to run up through the cowl box and out to the engine bay.
The AC condenser is attached to the radiator core support in the Bronco's nose, in front of the upgraded radiator.
Along with installing this Coyote, we upgraded the cooling system. We took out the old brass radiator and we installed an aluminum one. The Coyote obviously needs a lot more cooling capacity than what the original 302 did. So by adding that, it really helped out keep the Coyote cool, and we also had an electric fan as well.
The Coyote is a very wide engine, so a custom 45-degree bracket was needed for the hydraulic brake booster to clear the cylinder head.
Once said and done, it did add a little complexity to the brakes, mainly just the brake linkages, because you're using a bell crank instead of a direct connection to the brake pedal. But once it's all fine-tuned, it doesn't feel any different than being connected directly to the pedal. So as far as an air intake went, we decided to make a custom one. There was some pretty tight space constraints between the radiator and the front accessory drive of this Coyote. We went with a black wrinkle finish on a aluminum tube with a K&N filter on the end. And what it does is it comes out and almost makes a 90 right out of the throttle body, and it goes above the engine slightly and then goes over to the left-hand side. Generally, whenever you move the filter to the corner, you want to get it away from the engine and all the engine heat, because the colder air charge that you can get, the better performance that you're going to get.
The factory Ford engine cover interfered with the hood closing, so the V8 team trimmed it back and made a new front piece for the cover and coated it with black texture paint. They transferred the 5.0 badge to the new cover, and it looks like it was meant to be. Details are what make these jobs stand apart from junkyard takeout engine swaps. With engine in place, the V8 Fab team begins work on the exhaust.
So we went with a set of ceramic coated headers, and then we ran it through an X pipe with a Magnaflow muffler and out the back. So with the exhaust, it was kind of an in-depth exhaust system. We had a lot of cross members that we had to overcome, along with a transfer case, and like in a classic muscle car, you don't have that. So this one was a bit more challenging. From the driver's seat, I would say that it's kind of a wild ride is my best description of it, because it's a lifted Bronco on 35s that has 460 horsepower at this point, but it's fun, it's comfortable.
One of the first things I noticed about the Bronco is just how easy it is to drive now that we put the 5.0 Coyote engine in it. Before, you had to kind of feather the clutch a little bit to get it going, and shifting gears was a little bit sticky. And although we didn't really do anything to the transmission outside of go through the clutch a little bit and bolt it up to this new engine, the engine management system of the 5.0 Coyote engine is so refined that it almost drives itself.
So the Coyote actually revs really fast, And the Dakota Digital gauges have different parameters and how fast you would like your tach to react to the engine speed. So we ended up having to turn it up significantly, well, actually up to its max, to keep up with the Coyote. And we also had to add a filter so that way it has a more crisp signal and allows the tach to do its best to keep up with how fast the Coyote revs.
Now, a lot of times people ask us, do you really need over 400 horsepower in an old Bronco like this, or any old car? And I think the answer to that is that no, nobody really needs this stuff. But you'd be surprised when you put an engine that makes a lot more power in the car. It's not the peak number that matters. It's the torque that you make off the line, because all of a sudden the car is more eager to drive. It's effortless to get it moving, and you're not fighting it. You're not stepping on the gas all the way trying to get the thing to move. And that really enhances the experience. It makes it feel more like a newer car, especially when you've got a 5-speed transmission with the right gears. So your overall experience gets much, much better because the car is more fun to drive. You don't feel like you're bothering it so much. You feel like it wants to go. These engines have a very specific sound, and it's kind of funny when you put a Magnaflow exhaust system on a 5.0 Coyote engine. It's hard not to picture a late model Mustang going down the road. So this one, the envelope doesn't match the sound. But the nice thing is, here in the cockpit, you could drive around all day, and it doesn't drone. It's not overpoweringly loud. But when it comes time to step on the gas and hit the go pedal, it definitely makes a noise. Another neat thing about this Bronco is having such a short wheelbase with the manual transmission with a good clutch and a good power steering system. It's really, really easy to drive. You could drive this thing all day and get in and out of parking lots and around town with no problem. And out on the open road, it's just as easy. Right now I actually have the windows down but the AC on, and it's very, very comfortable. This thing doesn't really get hot. We had it at an outdoor car show, the Street Machine Nationals, and idled all over the fairgrounds with the windows down, and it was 100 degrees that day. Again, temperature gauge didn't really move, so you could drive this thing all day effortlessly without worrying about oil pressure or temperature problems.
Ultimately, at any point in time, in any gear, this thing, you can just lay into it, and it sounds like a Mustang, yet you're lifted. Well, you certainly won't get passed by economy cars.
The upgrades performed add a whole new level of practicality and usability to a truck that was once clunky and tricky to drive. Now, this Bronco is equally at home cruising down the highway, crawling rocky trails, or strutting at car shows, thanks to the clean and functional engineering of the V8 Speed Resto Shop team. What car project are you dreaming about? Contact the V8 Speed Resto Shop to learn how the V8 team can bring your ideal classic, muscle car, or show car, or truck back to life. Reach them at www.v8speedshop.com today.